Howdy y'all, I am Ice Gold, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about all of the new Arc 3 spellement paths, and technically Arc 4 as well, just the Shadow Spell spellement paths that we will be seeing in the spring update. 6 out of 7 schools have been teased with balance happening, I guess today as you're watching this, but tomorrow I guess as I record this, so I'm excited to see what's in store for balance, but I did want to go over the 6 that have been teased, and I am going to be working on a tier list for all of these new spellement paths that we will see, and Liahm and I will be doing a collab for that, and you'll see it sometime next week, so that will be what happens then. But for now, I want to go over just all of the spells that we've seen and just sort of look into what's going on with all the spells, what I think is strong and what I think is comically weak, and you will definitely see what I think is comically weak. The school that I'm recording this on is definitely not an indicator of anything related to that. But let's go ahead and start off with the Fire School. So Fire has gotten some interesting changes coming to it, and the first of which is going to be Fire from Above. Now I think that this one is going to be one that everybody, no matter whether you're PvP or PvE, no matter what mode you play, you're gonna like this change, because they have finally, after how many years has it been since they changed it into that triple dot? I can't remember, but it was totally useless for a while, because it would do a triple dot for, what is it, like 5 rounds or something like that, and then it would put on a fuel, which would immediately get used up by the triple dot, by the way. So you had that, but now they're finally changing it to where it'll do just shy of 1,000 base, and it will put the fuel back down again. So kind of a return to form. It's definitely strong again, and I do think that Fire Wizards are going to have a good time with the spell at long last. So I am excited for that. Definitely happy for all my Fire Wizards in the audience. Y'all deserve this at at this point, like after so long, and that's FFA for you. But for the PvP version, it does considerably less, because they, for some reason, have decided to take a shad off of all of the shadow hits, and because they were costing 2 shads before, and that was the whole thing. So now they're sort of reevaluating the value of the shad hits, and so now Fire from Above does 555 damage, and it puts down 255% fire traps. And this is obviously the PvP version. I don't really know how to feel about it. I think it might be okay, given that it's a hit and double trap. It's like a glorified Brimstone Revenant, so I guess it'll probably see use in a Fire's deck. I would predict that. So yeah, FFA, decent, I'll say that. It's a pretty alright change, I would say. And then the next one up is S'more Machine, and this one actually got a little bit of a change on the PvE path. It's prior to the spring update, and what it is on live at the moment is it'll do its damage, and then it'll put 3, I want to say 35% dot traps for fire, but those got a slight buff, and now they're 40%, so that is ultimately inconsequential, but it does have 5 tiers at this point, so, you know, we can finally upgrade our caramel spells past that. But the bottom path was honestly kind of a massacre. It's the new Wings of Fate for fire, pretty much. Like, it'll do some decent damage. It's a double dot and a single heal every time, so make of that what you will, I guess, but it's really just not that great, in my honest opinion. And there's hardly a difference between Tier 2 and Tier 5, so you have that as well. So S'more Machine kind of got massacred, kind of got dunked on, but is what it is there. FFA will probably be replacing it in a Fire's PvP deck. Next up is Blast Off, and this one is not any more useful than it was before. Its Path A is the same, and its Path B actually does do some decent damage. It's a selective target spell, but 6 pips and a shad to do 625 at the max tier. Bro. and it'll still put on a 420 damage deferred dot. So, still useless, but what do we expect? The last fire spell, or actually no, there's a couple more fire spells. So, Scion of Fire is allowed in PvE now, which I think is kind of interesting. It's if you have three damage over times on the target, then you can do like a ton of damage up front. Me personally, though, I think the original, like the top path, is probably just for the better, because like you take 6 traps on the target. It's like you can just do that with like fuels. So that's probably what I would say for PvE. But yeah, kind of interesting that the bottom path is allowed in PvE now, so that's pretty neat. And next up, Scorching Scimitar. This is going to be a recurring theme, I'm going to be real. Scorching Scimitar does 430 fire damage at the max tier and puts down to 40% traps. So FFA is just this but better. I would not even dream of using Scorching Scimitar like ever. So you have that, but it is actually a selective target spell now. As opposed to just the usual divide, where it's like if you would divide it between 2 mobs, it would do 50% of the damage, that type of deal. But now it does 75 with selective targets, so pretty neat. Long overdue change. And then there's a couple more, right? Yeah, a couple more. So Raging Bull no longer has to detonate on the top path, and it does marginally more damage. So it's like, okay. And then the bottom path has an interesting new mechanic. It will do selective target damage, like up to 640, but then it will detonate 3 damage over times for 160%. That is going to probably kill P for a while. That's just how I see it. Yeah, it's like you're just gonna get a bunch of dot spammers, and then, you know, if you don't bull the counter on turn 1, then guess what? You get bulled and your health deleted, so that's cool. So Fire's probably about to be on top in the PvP meta, so you will all enjoy that. So how about that? And then the last one is going to be Heckhound. Heckhound is actually getting spellements now, although I'm sure it's just going to be like another Beast Moon spellement type deal. But it's got some interesting stuff going on. It'll put down 250 traps if you have a heal on you on the bottom path. The top path is obviously just going to be an upgrade. But yeah, bottom path could be interesting, but I personally don't think it's going to see a whole lot of use. So those are the fire spells. I know I talked about it for a while, but what can you say? Next up is going to be my beloved Ice School. So the first one that we're going to talk about is going to be Shatterhorn. And this is an interesting one, because its top path, you know, gains a marginal amount of damage at tier 5. But then the bottom path, it'll do like absolutely meat and trash damage, but it'll put on 2 35% weaknesses. That, I think, could be marginally okay. It's pretty bad, though. So, yeah, probably not worth using. So, the next one up is going to be Snowball Barrage. Now, this one, for all of our PvE players, you know, this card is sort of the lifeblood of Ice after Polaris. And it's getting a pretty hefty buff once you put spellments into it. This will go from 95 ice damage per pip at the base version up to 115 ice damage per pip at the max tier on the A path. So very, very strong, and I mean, it's going to be good. So I'm excited for that. But for the bottom path, it's basically just Scorching Scimitar, but it costs 6 pips now. So 545 ice damage, and it'll put on to 40% traps. So kinda not the greatest, I'll say that. Personally would not put it in my deck, but you know, what can you say? So I'm sure you're seeing a theme here. The ice spells are all beat and trash. So I mean, the A path for Snowball Barrage is good at least, so you have that going. So for the next one up, we have Climaclysm, and this one, it's now a selected target rather than just a divide, and the bottom path, it basically just does the same damage as a volcanic golem, and now it'll put down to 70% chromatic shields instead of 45s. So This, you might think at first glance, oh, you know, that's cool. It's Volcanic Golem, but, you know, it's got an extra shad's worth of value going into the shields. The problem is, this spell exists. More importantly, this spell exists, and it will completely invalidate your shad and your 4-pips and your turn using Climaclysm. So, yeah, Climaclysm, never going to see any use. I will say that right now. It's a cool idea, but shields are just the easiest hanging effect counter at the moment, so that makes it not viable for an Ice's deck. Next up is Abominable Weaver, which, oddly enough, is doing the exact same thing. I couldn't tell you why. It's doing a little bit more damage, but ultimately is still putting on 2 70% chromatic shields. Don't know why. Really don't know why they put this on 2 spells. Really could not tell you why at all. We could have gotten like I don't know, a push negative charm type deal, because Ice is a, you know, weakness school, and it also counters weaknesses. So, you know, that was a missed opportunity. I think if it were to push, I don't know, 2 negative charms and then do its damage, I think that could make it way better, but yeah, it doesn't, so whiz. Yeah, that. And then next up is Scion of Ice, and this will finally be usable in PvE as well. I think this actually could be quite interesting for my On a Budget series, and it looks like it's getting a little bit of a nerf, actually, if, is that right? Or no, it's getting a bit of a buff. So the base damage will go down, but the gambit damage will go up, which I think is just fine. I'm all for that, especially since shields are so easy to counter these days. So buffing Scion of Ice is going to be a very welcome change for me. So there you have that. Scion of Ice. There's not really much about it that's changing, but I do think that it could see use in my budget walkthrough characters deck, so we'll just have to see how that is looking. Next on the list is Freeze Ray, and this is actually the last one to talk about for Ice. Yeah, it's the Shatterhorn concept, but it does a little more damage, and the weaknesses are slightly weaker. It's 230 weaks and 545 select target ice damage. Absolutely dog. Like, dude, come on. The devs didn't have to do Ice this bad. But, yeah, Ice is even more boned than we previously thought possible. So, there you have it. The Ice spells are all bad. Who could have seen that coming, right? Next on the list, I want to check out the death spells. And, yeah, I mean... Alright, so Kisma's Curse is the first one that I have up. And it's actually pretty decent. It's a double 45 blade after like a little hit. I think that this could actually be quite useful in a Death's deck. You can't really spam it necessarily, so that will be somewhat healthy, I guess. So it's basically like a Death's catch, and I don't know. I like it. I think it's a good card. So definitely excited for that. So there we have that. That is Kisma's Curse. Next on the list is Snack Attack, and the reason why I was starting to talk about like the whole push negative charms type deal for Ice is because of this, as well as Mystic Colossus, which we'll get to. But this will steal 4 blades from the target, from like up to 4 targets actually, and then it will do a little bit of damage. Out and out useless, but the concept is cool. So next up is Grim Reader, and this one is also kind of a buff. We've got it's going down to 1 shad like all of them, like all of the shad spells are, but it is doing up to 600 damage at the max tier and putting on 2 40% chromatic weaknesses. So the chromatic weaknesses get buffed by a little bit, by about 5%, and the damage goes down. But it is still going to be quite a hit, and I do think that it's going to have a strong place in a lot of Death Wizards decks. This Grim Reader is going to be pretty solid, and we'll just have to see how it shakes up the meta. And there was another little change that happened with the PvE path. This is now doing up to 1175 at the max tier, which is very strong, but it's for 8 pips in a shad, so... You have that, and then, yeah, it's putting on 2 25% universal weaknesses as opposed to chromes. So that'll help out a lot in the later worlds. So there you have that. That is Grim Reader. Next up is Winged Sorrow. And this spell has been kind of in the gutter for as long as I can remember. But the path A does buff the damage kind of nicely, and then the path B is... it's a little interesting. It'll do up to 615 damage at the max tier, and it will put a negative healing aura on the target for 6 rounds. That, I think, is really cool, but the problem is you can just aura over it, and it's like, that's a shad and 6 pips gone. So, very cool. Except not. So, the concept is neat, but it's too easy to counter at the moment. So, there's Winged Sorrow. Next up is Call of Curlew, and this will do absolutely meat and trash damage, but it will put a minus 30% outgoing damage aura on the target for 4 rounds, so it's like a hit and weakness aura. And just like the Winged Sorrow type deal, it's just too easy to counter. But neat concept, I will say that. And the last one up is going to be Scion of Death, and yeah, nothing really changed about the spell on the A path, and the B path is now allowed in PvE. So, all in all, pretty neat. What can you say? It's pretty good. So, there you have that. So, next up is going to be the Life School, and this is an interesting one. Let's go over it. So, okay, first up is going to be Wings of Fate, and this has got a lot of implications to it, because it's doing like its little initial hit now, and it's putting on 2 470 bomb dots on the targets, and they go off after 4 rounds, and it'll obviously put on like the heal as per usual. But yeah, this has some pretty insane implications to it, because this means that we could potentially be seeing life as a whole getting bomb dots as opposed to, you know, like the regular dots like Burrowing Bane right now, and that could really shake up the PvP meta. And you'll see when we get to the myth spells how that's sort of changing things, but for life to potentially become the bomb dot school, I think that's a pretty hefty nerf to them. So we'll just have to see if they follow through with all of life's damage over times. So there we have that. Next up is going to be Lord of the Jungle, and this one, I don't actually think this one changed at all. I think it might have buffed the, I guess, damage or the percentage value on the blade and guiding light on the bottom path, but yeah, otherwise didn't really change much at all. So yeah, there is that. And then next is Lamasu, and this one's an interesting one. It'll do a little bit of damage, and then it'll put out a plus 45% life outgoing damage aura. So that's a cool one. I will say that. Yeah, I mean, 45% is nothing to scoff at. It is pretty strong, but again, all you have to do is collect the Attenuate card. So there you go. But overall, I do think that Lamasu could be kind of useful, just sort of as a surprise move, but we will just have to see how things shake up with that. Next on the list is Scion of Life, and this is continuing the trend of Wings of Fate, where it's now 2 bomb dots, and yeah, I mean, if you have 3 heal over times on yourself, then it can do all the damage up front, which is kind of neat. But yeah, if I was even a PvE player, I would say bottom path is still the best, just because you don't need a 3,000 health heal, so there you go, especially for 11 pips. So, what else we got? Grenadier. This is the next one up. Kind of minuscule damage, but it'll activate 2 heal overtimes for 115% damage. So, kind of a neat little mechanic there. It's not too overpowered, I don't think, so Grenadier, kind of nice. And the last one that we've got is Hungry Caterpillar, and they significantly reduce the damage on this spell. Yeah, by quite a bit, I'll say. But they buffed the heal a ton. Like, it's a 4-round heal, and it's 1,000 split across 2, so pretty much hidden heals are kind of just going to become like the thing for Life Wizards from here on out. So we will just have to see how these changes affect them in the coming metas. But yeah, ultimately Life is being pushed much more in a healing direction as opposed to what it is right now. So we'll see if that helps or hurts them. Guess we'll have to find out. Next on the list is going to be the myth spells. So first up we've got Snake Charmer, and this one is a little interesting because it does still put a bomb dot down. Myth has been the bomb dot school forever, but yeah, you'll kind of see where I'm heading with this in a moment. But it does absolutely garbage damage, and then it puts a 350 deferred dot on the target. So kind of interesting, but ultimately awful. So there's that. Witch's House Call got completely gutted in this teaser. The damage got completely nuked, and it still summons the minion, which, as we know, is completely useless. So there you have that. And then next up, we've got Scion of Myth. Same as all the other Scions. It's a trap gambit on the bottom path, but I would still say just use the top path because, you know, stun block, not that hard to get 3 of, so you have that going for you. So Myth definitely in a good spot with her Scion, just as it stands. And then we have Tasselworm Terror. The bottom path is interesting. It's a 240% trap type deal, like Scorching Scimitars and Snowball Barrage were on the bottom path, and the damage is pretty bad. But the top path does at least get you a hit that's comparable to Orthrus at the max tier. So finally, you know, there's a hit, there's an AoE that Myth has that is stronger than Orthrus, so, or at least on par at the lowest end. So you have that going for you now for all my Myth Wizards. Next up is Barbarian Saga, and this is the one that shakes things up. It's like the base version and the top path do still put a deferred dot down, but the bottom path is gonna be the new meta shad for Myth. It does some damage, but it'll put 2 Myth dots, regular dots, on the target for 4 rounds, and those dots do some pretty strong damage comparatively, and I do think that this carries a lot of implications for Myth, because if it becomes a, you know, regular dot school, then that's pretty solid, I would say. So yeah, Myth getting regular dots back I think is an interesting choice, but we will see how it shakes out, and we will also see if they decide to carry it over to all of their spells, because if Hero of Chrysalis becomes a regular dot, that is going to be a colossal buff to the Myth school in a meta where I don't think they really need it. So there you have that. Next up is Mystic Colossus, and this will actually steal 4 shields and then do a tiny amount of damage. So it's a good shield counter. It can set up a gen, I guess, in 1 turn, but ultimately pretty useless. But a cool idea nonetheless. And that is it for the Myth School, and finally we've got the Storm spells. So starting off with Scion of Storm. This, I don't really think needed its PvE path, because the PvP path rather, because the PvE path, the top path, is very, very strong. I mean, it is the highest damaging spell in the game, with a total of 2,840 damage at the max tier, which is so strong. And then the bottom path is obviously, you know, Gambit for charms for just shy of 2,000 base damage, so it's cool. But ultimately, I don't really see it getting much use outside of like advanced content on the bottom path, so, which it already was, so, you know, there you have that. So Storm Scion, kinda neat. Next up is Rusalka's Wrath, and this is an interesting one, I'll say that. So it does honestly quite a bit of damage, 905, which is kind of strong for right now. And it'll give a chromatic outgoing 40% damage aura. Now, I have been saying, you know, just click the attenuate card and you're good, but this, yeah, I mean, it's looking strong. I'm gonna say that. Like, it's a strong card, and I think we're gonna see, like, not just Storms packing it. So We'll really just have to see how things go with this. But yeah, it seems kind of interesting. Next on the list is going to be Iron Sultan, which is kind of like an inverse. It does some damage, and then it'll put a minus 40% chromatic outgoing damage aura on the target. So it's like the Hackett fusion, but stronger, I guess, on the effect. So it's a 40% on Iron Sultan compared to the 25 on Hackett's Curse. Next up is Sound of Musicology. Now this carries with it some implications as well, because this is 5 pips in a shad to do like the same amount of damage as Catch, roughly, I think a little less actually, and give 2 40% chromatic blades. And people saw this and rightfully said, like, this is just a worse Catch. And I think that we might be seeing Catch of the Day getting nerfed in this update. We haven't seen that for sure, but if they're making a shad spell do like less than what Catch currently does, then yeah, I think we should expect a Catch nerf in the very near future. I know that the developers have sort of been talking about it, and it's become kind of a problem with some schools using it, but ultimately, Sound of Musicology might be its replacement. We will just have to see that to be sure about it. So, there you go. That is Sound of Musicology. And next up is Dark and Stormy. Honestly, kind of a massacre. It's like this was their opportunity to finally make the spell a hit and double hot, but they didn't. And yeah, so it kind of just blows. So, yeah, it does some decent damage, and it is a high-value spell, but the second you queue a balance, it will get gearheaded, and have fun with that. So, yeah, that is Wiz for you. I think it could see some use, though. We will just have to see about it, but yeah, ultimately, it's like a glorified Goat Monk, so just not really the best card out there. So there's that. And then the final spell that I will be going over today is going to be Glowbug Squall, and this one is basically just a selected target hit, 630 damage, and then 2 30% weaknesses. Not too great, in my opinion, but it is what it is there. So, with that being said, that is all of the spells. I think that there's going to be a lot of things shaken up with the meta in the coming update. We will just have to see, and we will have to see how things are looking with all of the all of the new fusions and cards that we haven't seen yet. So yeah, with that being said, thank y'all for watching. I've been Ice Gold. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave like 50 comments for the algorithm. My Discord is down in the description if you want to chat with me some more, and I will see y'all later.